got your. Oh, here we go.
Just recorded the outro. Now we're going to do the intro.
The only way to do podcasts. So
The only art of procurement.
We've done the middle bit of the pod. We've done the actual podcast. Now we've done the outro. Let's do the intro.
It's how I like to eat my sandwiches. To be fair, I like the filling on the top.
Oh yeah.
And then and then a stable foundation of bread.
This is exactly why we've got a behavioural psychologist in to analyse you personally. Anyway, hello and welcome back to Let's Talk Procurement, the only show you need, yes you, to master the art of procurement. Let's go.
Yeah, so today we've got a behavioural scientist, Jonti, on a podcast. Gives some really good insights, and he kind of blows our brain really about how procurement can influence stakeholders and, you know, incentives and targets we touch on. But I mean, if you wanted me to kind of read out our script exactly how as we said it, I can do that as the intro, and then you won't have to listen to the full episode. Should we do that, or should we just?
No, let's not do that. Let the expert do the talking. His name is Jonti. It's not John Terry.
Thanks for clearing that up.
Strap in. Just you know, I know JT is probably a little bit out of our budget. But if he is listening, JT, procurement, how to procure your teammate's wife? Let us know. Get in touch. And I think before we dive into a bit of Jonti, shall we have a look at the bulletin? Luke 10, what have we got on the bulletin today?
Sorry, that really put me off there. What have we got on the bulletin? You tell me.
You're the bulletin man. You know, we're season 2. How's your SIPS journey going? I think that was part of the bulletin, wasn't it?
Now
you came out about your change in.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, there'll be no Chico time happening for the exams, but there will be Chico time happening for the assignments route, which is the one I'm doing. And yeah, like a good procurement person, I've made no progress on that, so still waiting to do my induction. I'll report back to you once I know more.
Brilliant. And do we have any listener messages?
Well, they were all kind of targeted hate messages at you, so I didn't want to read them out necessarily. But
okay, you didn't want to read out the one where we got a nice bit of feedback from someone in the SIPS organisation.
Go on, you do that one.
Well, I'm not going to leave his name. We haven't got permission to use his name, but someone who is a SIPS SIPS ambassador has got in touch and said that we've done some great work and to carry on and keep up the podding. So we do appreciate that, and thank you for getting in touch.
That does remind me as well that in our sort of shared email inbox, I was looking at that email and I saw another one come through, and it was saying that we had purchased. It was like, oh, here's your purchase confirmation for your new subscription of McAfee Security. So I clicked on the quote. It said $720. So I'm thinking, bloody hell, what's going on here? And then I read the email address and it was like X593. So it was definitely a hack email address. So if one of you listeners has hacked our email inbox, I'll be really mad.
But we'd love to have you on to tell us how you did it.
Yes, yeah. Just don't blackmail us, please.
We're all about turning things into positivity, right? So if you are a hacker, come and get in touch. We'd love to pick up some tips. On that note, should we dive into today's episode?
Yeah, let's do it. Hope you enjoy.
Enjoy. Well, I think we just jump straight into it. So to get to know our guests, as the listeners know, we like to do some quick fire questions, and you like to come up with some wacky ones. So hopefully you've done your homework and brought some questions to the table. Jonti, do you prefer being called John or Jonti, or do you?
No,
not...
I'm a Jonti,
okay,
or a Jonathan,
brilliant.
but everyone knows me as Jonti.
No, brilliant. I like it. It's a unique name. It's not one I've seen before. So, yeah. Where did it originate from? Can I ask that?
Yeah, of course. So I think there's loads of South African Jontis. There was a cricketer called Jonti Rose who was a fantastic fielder. But actually, my parents had friends from New Zealand, and when I was born a long time ago, I was both a Jonti and a Jonathan.
Brilliant.
I've alternated between the two, but now it's a firmly Jonti. Yeah.
No, nice. Yeah, if you've got what I would perceive as a unique name certainly in the UK, why not use it? I mean,
it's helped me get a job. I mean, we talk about psychology, and so standing out, grabbing people's attention is often the first sort of filter, the first bias you need to get through. And I did have a successful job interview once, and the first person interviewing me said, I saw your CV and I thought, I've never met a Jonti before. I have to meet the Jonti.
The one and only.
He was Russian, so he referred to me as the Jonti. But so we met, and the rest was history. So yeah, get through people's filters.
No, that's awesome. Well, obviously, we need to have a chat with our parents, Luke, because they didn't try very hard.
I think I'm after Luke from the Bible and Luke Skywalker.
I was going to say, it does conjure up sort of a heroic narrative that you're obviously both going through with this podcast. I don't know where you're on the hero journey at the moment yet. Have you had some big revelation in your podcasting experience that going to find out you're related to each other or something?
It does feel like that could be the case, but I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't ever refer to Luke 10 as a hero. More like an anti-hero, or kind of
a villain.
Those kind of piss take heroes that you get, where they kind of fly over to the wrong destination or something like that at the wrong time, or they're too late to the scene. But I guess in some people's perspective, that's quite handy.
At least I'm there. Yeah.
Right, leading on nicely, Mr. Hero, would you like to do your quick fire questions for Jonti?
Yeah, there's a couple of simple ones, and there's a couple of slightly unhinged ones. So the first one kind of covered a little bit already. So introduce yourself, kind of name, occupation, and background, if you could.
Hello, and great to meet you both, and thanks for having me on. I'm Jonti Dalal Small. I'm a psychologist, so I'm very interested in how people think, feel, and therefore behave. So I use psychological insights. So sometimes call myself a behavioural scientist, so applying those insights to sort of services and consumer behaviour, for example, but also an organisational psychologist. So very much interested in organisational decision making, which of course is often procurement folk tend to play quite a big role actually behind the scenes in organisational decision making. So really fascinated to hear your perspectives on that.
Brilliant. Yeah. No. I guess that's something we'll dive into later about decision making. So glad we're thinking about the same topics already. Next question is sweet or savoury?
Which do I prefer to eat? Yes.
Yeah.
Savoury generally, but I mean all the best things combine all five flavours, all five tastes, don't they? So, but yeah, definitely savoury. Yeah.
And similar to that, if you could only have one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be? Breakfast, lunch, dinner?
I don't know. I mean, I've just had well, here in North of England, dinner is lunch and dinner is tea. So for my dinner, tea, or breakfast, it'll be the same meal throughout the day. I'm very happy with massive salad with lots of protein of various sorts and lots of fruit and vegetables, but not so much fruit, but some fruit in there as well. So it was a really varied meal. I'm sure you could fudge it a little bit and tamper with the proportions of the ingredients while still having the same meal all the time. That would be fine.
Yeah, so you're thinking about loopholes. I like it. Yeah. If you had no electricity for 12 months, how would you keep yourself sane?
Well, we had solar installed last year, so that's just not going to happen, I'm afraid. So I refuse to entertain the premise of your question. I mean, I still read lots of books, so they'd be fine.
Have you Sorry, have you read all those books behind you?
I know what's in them all. I've not read them all cover to cover. But
I mean, that's a fantastic collection. Just for the listeners' benefit, there's I don't know, is that one bookshelf?
Giant
Is that
bookshelf.
4? Yeah.
that's 3 IKEA Billy bookshelves and some more under the desk, and yeah.
Nice, brilliant. Sorry, carry on. That was just it. Just piqued my interest. There's a lot of books there.
So a philosophy one now. A trolley is travelling down a track heading towards 2 people. You have the option to pull a lever and switch it to a different track where it would kill 1 person. Would you do it?
The trolley problem, which philosophers throughout millennia of history have failed to address adequately. You're asking, am I a utilitarian? Would I prioritise, or am I a rights-based philosopher? I have no idea, really. No. The trolley problem.
Would you let fate happen as fate was meant to happen, or would you intervene and pull the switch to reduce the damage? I guess.
So which way was it going? Was it going to hit them or not?
Going
it was going to 2 people.
To 2 people, yeah.
Yes.
And you can switch it to change it to 1 person.
Yeah, I don't think I would, because I do. Whilst quite appealing, I do think utilitarian arguments get quite dangerous quite quickly, and quite simplified quite quickly. So on principle, no, I wouldn't. Yeah.
I would do the same, by the way. I think I was asked in an episode where you get to know the hosts, and I agreed. Something about fate.
Okay. So a little bit more unhinged now. Would you rather 1 million up front or a chance at 10 million if you beat a giraffe in a fight?
10 million if I beat a giraffe in a fight.
Or 1 million up front.
I don't know. I mean, the kids really enjoyed the story Giraffes Can't Dance, which is a fantastic bedtime book. I don't know if either of you are familiar with that. It's on my shelves, you refer to somewhere.
Yeah, Luke's mum still reads it to him at the moment.
Yeah.
Every night.
But that in that book, Gerald is a giraffe. His legs are very bandy. They assume he can't dance. All the animals get together for a jungle dance every year, and then he sort of excels and smashes it out of the park. So I think I'd need to say £1 million, because don't underestimate giraffes. It's the main message of that book.
Fair enough. I like that. So next question is, would you rather have the ability to read minds or the ability to convince anyone of your argument?
Well, it's an interesting question. Firstly, I don't certainly not the latter, so convince anyone of my argument, because I'm going to talk a bit about behavioural science. Behavioural science gets a bad name when people, it's trying to manipulate people, so you need to try and shoot that down as early as possible. But then reading minds is interesting as well, because I used to do, well, sometimes I still do, workshops of introductions to behavioural science. And those workshops are called, we're all psychologists starting to think like a behavioural scientist. And the reason it was called that was because before I had kids and before the pandemic, I used to go to parties, used to go to pubs, the like of which you go to and chat about procurement. People would say to me, you're a psychologist. Does that mean you can read people's minds? And the answer was always, well, actually, we're all trying to read each other's minds all the time. But there's a bit of a method and a rigour to behavioural science. So yes, anything I could do to understand people's minds better would definitely be good, personally and professionally.
Nice, that's a brilliant answer. And I thought you'd say that about the convince anyone of your argument. I think it's good to kind of bounce ideas off people sometimes, unless they're Luke 1. Sorry, did we explain? He's Luke 1, I'm Luke 10.
Yeah, well, you were getting
Luke 100, and no, is it? No, I've got it all wrong.
And then next one is, so there's only 2 more. So
Yep.
What does procurement mean to you?
What does procurement mean to me? I mean, I've got a big place in my heart for procurement. Some of my best friends are procurement officials and the like. I mean, you procure things, and hopefully well. But talk a little bit about how people think, feel, and behave, so how you might procure even better.
So the last one is one that we've asked a few guests, and it's, what animal do you think would be best in procurement and why?
Which animal would be best in procurement, as in being a chief procurement? Which animal ought to be king of the
Yeah,
jungle.
what traits
Chief
would kind of
procurement,
lend itself
chief
to?
procurement officer. Which one would be best? I think which animal? I think maybe a spider, in the sense that a spider has a fantastic process, and I think there's an underappreciated, undervalued importance of process, actually, in contrast to analysis for procurement officers. It's very easy for anyone in business making decisions to think about, okay, right, have we got our analysis right? Have we got all the data? Whilst not thinking about the methodical process you should go through. And that process, you could talk about this, about counteracting the cognitive biases that come into decision making. Fascinating study looking at over 1,000 different decisions in businesses, right from the really big, do we buy a company, do we not buy a company, how do we invest, those types of strategic decisions. And in that study, actually process beat analysis by a factor of 6. You can have a fantastic analysis, but it can be wrought with different biases that actually mean the decision ends up being a bad decision. So there's great value to having a really rigorous and sort of behaviourally informed process. And I would say the spider has that tried and tested process. May not be quite aware of cognitive biases when it's spinning its web, but for the sake of argument, let's assume it does. But the spider has a fantastic process, and I think that is probably undervalued in procurement types. But I suppose spiders are very solitary and work alone, and procurement officers to be effective need to be much more collaborative. So sort of like some sort of team player spider would be my best animal for a procurement officer.
Like an ant or something? I suppose that's kind of changing your answer, but no,
yeah, I don't know about ants. Ants have a process as well in different roles, but no, the spider for the process. But
yeah,
spider
I like that
works collaboratively.
I like that, but a lot of people don't like spiders. Kind of will take us on nicely to one of our topics later, won't it? About how psychology can help, how we're perceived as a function, really. But yeah, we'll add that to the collection of animals. The zoo is growing. A couple of snakes in there, an elephant, maybe 2 elephants, a cat. So yeah, welcome to the spider.
Yep.
Cool. That was it for the quickfire questions. So the next part we wanted to ask was, what is behavioural science?
What is behavioural science? So does this have to be a quick fire answer? Or,
just in a way that our listeners would kind of understand it, I suppose, how they can take it away.
Yeah. So there's a couple of definitions of behavioural science that I think put it quite well and quite crisply. So one way to think about behavioural science, there's a guy called Matt Wallopert who wrote a fantastic book about this, and in there he says that behavioural science is all about behaviour, some target behaviour. That's what we're aiming for. That's the outcome. So people might behave in one way today. How can we encourage them to behave in a different way in the future? But our process is science. So behavior is the outcome. The process is science. So just as other forms of science, they generate insights. You form a hypothesis. You test the hypothesis. That is the science bit of behavioral science as well. But it's hard, and so all behavioral science models are thinking about, how do people behave today? How would we like them to behave in the future, and then how can we close that gap using the evidence, the insights that we have, and then the scientific method.
So in terms of what we spoke about before about motivating certain behaviour, obviously you've got things like incentives and targets, and I think that's one thing sometimes we see in procurement when it goes wrong is, for example, in a tender response. You get a supplier who submits the cheapest bid, because maybe the target for that procurement was, pick the cheapest one, and it turns out that supplier hasn't actually priced everything into their bid, or not everything's been considered. So how could behavioural science kind of work in that context to kind of talk about incentives and targets?
So, there's different stages where you might apply behavioural science. I suppose really you want to get as far upstream in the process as possible. Of course, you might apply behavioural science after you've procured a terrible contract and the supplier's not doing what they would say, ways of sort of interacting with people and influencing people at that stage. But clearly, it's much more desirable to get upstream as early as possible. So I suppose I'd sort of throw it back to you. So why are those contracts being written in that way? Why are organisations or procurement functions going out in a way that people know this is a thing? Why has it not been addressed before?
So that makes me think about supplier selection. When you say high up in the process or sort of early doors, supplier selection is a really interesting one, because whilst procurement often take the position of a gatekeeper or a guardian or whatever you want to say, we will go to market, look at a number of suppliers, but there are a lot of instances where the business may already have a supplier in mind. The scoring factors behind supplier selection is driven by the different motives of individuals. And let's say you're working on a bid or a new area, then it can be quite fast paced. And I think rapid timescales don't always line up well with taking the appropriate amount of time to make an appropriate decision. And sometimes we feel like we've made our bed and we have to lie in it.
Yeah. So with that decision making, clearly you can't get everything right all the time, and actually it's not that important always to get things right. So Herbert Simon, who's one of the godfathers of behavioural science, really led the field in terms of understanding organisational decision making, made that what's now a classic distinction between maximising and satisficing, and this used for economic decisions that we might make. Go to the supermarket. We don't need to look at every product and say, am I getting the maximum value for money with everything I buy? I just know that I've gone to Lidl, and therefore it's they're saying they're the cheapest supermarket time in, time out. I'll be happy with that decision. So how do procurement folk decide when to maximise and when to satisfy with a contract? And is there something that's going wrong there with the time pressures? For example, there are actually some contracts where it'd be much better to say, no, this is something we need to get right and take our time on this. Whereas these other things are time where, okay, fine, we'll just go with what seems like the approximately best choice.
Yeah, and I think we try and capture that by having a preferred supplier list, in a sense of already identified contracts in place and kind of moving forward from there. But that's quite often we get, I used to work for this company, or I know someone who works at this company, and they'll be a great fit. Well, would they, or are you just helping your friend out because that's what you believe you should do?
Yeah, and that's why I think procurement does need to be much more like a spider with a rigorous behaviourally informed process. Because if that process, you're doing fantastic analysis, but that analysis is completely skewed to our mates who we've worked with before, the analysis on paper looks fantastic, but it's going to deliver maybe some pretty terrible outcomes down the way. So how do you, just as you apply behavioural science, for example, to improve selection and assessment of people who are brought into an organisation, because otherwise people just use interviews, which are a terribly biased way of selecting people. And it sounds like that sort of, even though procurement has its, this is our official analysis and process, if the process itself isn't behaviourally informed, you've not addressed the different biases and things that throw things up in the way, then you will get the same bad outcomes.
Yeah, and I think it's how can we, so for example, I understand that someone who is a delivery manager will have very different ambitions and kind of needs within their project to myself as the procurement professional versus the financial controller on the project. We've all got these different aspects, and more often than not we align with finance quite well, because obviously we're helping finance save some pennies, so that's great. However, project manager might be looking to deliver the project quicker. They might not care so much about the cost aspect, and I think, like you said, it's that degree of flexibility and understanding. But I often feel that we as a department are kind of seen as, well, you can make an exception to this process, or you can, doesn't matter if we use our mate at this one-off time. But when it's the other way around, it's not quite reciprocated. When we say, we want to go and challenge, or we want to test the waters, do some benchmarking. And I think I would love to hear your kind of thoughts on how we can challenge that and change maybe change the way it's perceived.
Yeah, I mean, immediately as a sort of organizational psychologist, but also thinking about the what's just happened to our country in terms of we have a change of government.
Yeah.
And our Prime Minister, Starmer, he was a prosecutor, so he's very much, he's brought in the ethics advisor straight away. He's changing the culture of government, because don't spell out what the culture of the previous government was like, but let's say rather more sort of laissez-faire in terms of making exceptions to, be it COVID restrictions, which are well documented, uncontroversial case at this point. But you see this in organisations as well. What is the culture of the organisation that you're working in as procurement people? Is it a culture where exceptions are made willy-nilly because of different mates relationships, or is it a culture where there's other values that aren't just on the mouse map or actually practiced in reality? And I'm sure this is quite a sort of, people who have become procurement people haven't necessarily got into it to think about changing the culture of the organisation, but I suppose my challenge would be, ultimately, this is something that procurement people will need to think about if they want to escape that situation. Where might there be allies in the organisation who can join up the dots between what may be happening in a procurement function or the pressure you're in to make exceptions which lead to bad outcomes, with what else is happening in the organisation. It might be, ultimately, they might be thinking in terms of reputational risk, or I've done a lot of work in building a data ethics culture in organisation, or social value aspects. It'll take some creativity and sort of internal networking, but where can procurement people find allies to change the culture of the organisation you're in? It's a big and challenging project, but I think ultimately that's what would need to happen to change that situation.
No, that's interesting. I mean, that's a top-down approach in many ways, isn't it? Because, I can put forward a compelling argument as to why this supplier should not be selected.
Yeah.
But if management then come and say, well, fine, I see all your points, but here you go, I'm willing to sign off that risk and we'll just crack on. That's it done, right? And that's something we have to kind of bite the bullet on. And I feel like sometimes I have to demonstrate the value of what I'm doing in terms of calling out the risks and perhaps trying to explain that my role isn't just finding the supplier that is giving it to us for the cheapest price, because cheap doesn't always mean good or successful, right? Because that's another thing, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but over the last sort of maybe 40 years or so, procurement itself as a function has changed like dramatically. I mean, back in the day, it was probably a lot of backhanders to get the deals, and there was a lot of, it really was who you know, but also it was a bit more hardware based, specific buying, repeat purchases, kind of category management as we might call it now. Whereas now we're looking at things you mentioned, data ethics, AI, data protection, cyber security, all of these things that now come around with software as a service, software contracts, and I feel like that goes a little bit under the radar, or is undervalued. And
I mean, the procurement function, the change is made much better than I do or ever will, but I'm so vaguely familiar of those sort of global there's a global standard, isn't there, for procurement, the competency framework, which is currently being refreshed, I think.
Yeah, no, it isn't.
I'm sure that will that has already sort of charted that change in procurement. Competencies is very close to my heart as an organisational psychologist. What are the skills, abilities, and aptitudes that people bring to the work? And I was looking at before our call, there's different ways in which being innovative, being collaborative. It's a different mindset, and that's part of the challenge for procurement: how to get into a different mindset, not just the mechanics of procurement function in inverted commas.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you know your ISOs very well, but we've got an ISO 44001, which is particularly about collaboration with partners, and it's become quite a hot topic in procurement in the last sort of 12 to 24 months. And it's if you're in a large organisation, can you work with a smaller organisation and form a partnership that's mutually collaborative and beneficial? And actually, the opinions you hear from different people in the industry, some of them are just, well, this is all wishy-washy, but you sign it off, it looks great and blah, blah, blah. And actually, from where I've been involved in it, it's been fantastic because we've seen a lot more agility by working with the smaller companies, and they've kind of stepped up and shown us some of their expertise.
Right.
But on the flip side, we've been able to support them grow their businesses as well. And actually, it's been very, very beneficial. And it's not just we've got ISO 44001, look at us, we're great.
Yeah.
And it does feel like we're in that stage where there's that kind of the different cultures in procurement are still there. It's like a long vertical of varying culture, and it seems to be quite inconsistent actually. Now I'm talking out loud about it.
Yeah. And so, I mean, so the behavioural science approach to these challenges is to say, okay, what is the specific behaviour we're trying to change here? What's the target behaviour? So if there's a behaviour in terms of people wanting to do things by exception, the first step actually is to just to workshop, brainstorm why are people behaving that way today, but do it holistically. So I went off to culture because I'm obsessed with culture, but actually there's the individual level and there's the team level, there's the organizational level, societal level that sits around it. But even just keeping it to the individual level, when people are behaving that way, why, what are the driving forces and what are the things that are blocking them from behaving in the way in which we'd like them to behave? Is it their motivation? Is it the opportunity? Is it the capabilities? And then the behavioral science method is listing those out and saying, what can we change? Where can we try and see if this has an effect?
So actually, the behavioural science side of it is diving in a little bit deeper and probably doing maybe a SWOT analysis or something like that. I kind of smiled to myself and took a bit of notes down there, because you said about certain behaviours that you want to question, and I'm not by any stretch of the means saying procurement are perfect, but sales functions and project managers in particular, I've written those both down, because if I can understand better why they're doing what they are doing, then actually, because you mentioned drivers and blockers, and I think they would call procurement a blocker. And that's the bit that I really want to see change.
Sorry for being quiet as well. As I think some major emergency happening down the road from my house. I've seen about 5 ambulances go past. But anyway, I think in terms of trying to understand internal people, at least behaviour, in terms of why they don't necessarily want procurement to get involved, I think it kind of becomes a negative cycle where procurement get involved late in the process. So they're sort of like, well, what's going on here? Have we done this? Have we done that? Make sure you've checked this. And then they kind of slow it down. And then that leads to next time procurement getting involved later, I think. And it sort of becomes a negative cycle. So do you think there are ways that we could kind of, market ourselves potentially or behave to our internal stakeholders that would mean we would get involved earlier in the process, so we could have a more value adding action, I suppose?
I'm sure in many organizations there's a potentially hugely positive, almost like campaign to be run to change the perception of procurement. And I'm not particularly close to procurement, but crudely it seems to be that cost versus value dynamic, and procurement being pigeonholed as being all about cost and not really bringing the value. So sort of lots of psychology to bring to bear then about how you get through people's filters and through their lenses, and where can you show that you've made sort of decisions that have been based on value rather than cost and the positive impact it's had. Because it seems like, yes, you do need to understand where salespeople are coming from, where project management people are coming from, really get their perspective. Don't just assume it, don't just take it, but at the same time these things do take a long time. Insight from behavioral science is that we tend to dramatically underestimate the amount of communication we need to do. I was on a call this morning, so it's really hard with communication. It's either too much or too little. You even get it wrong, and I was like, that's ridiculous, that's crazy. It's never about too little communication. We have to communicate 10 times more than we think we need to actually get our perspective across for people to really internalize and understand that, and experiment with different types of communication as well. So it's fantastic. One of the reasons I'm excited to come on is that a podcast for procurement is exciting because it's a different medium to PowerPoint or email or other more traditional devices. Different mediums in that way as well. So that's that campaign, repositioning the role that procurement plays, that sort of collaborative approach, that sort of innovative approach as well, to challenge people's myths, and then get people. Part of it will also be about helping people in the organization act differently. Not just think differently, not just get your comms messages right so that people are hearing the right things about procurement, but actually getting them to act differently as well. Maybe that's sort of a less adversarial way with procurement, maybe it's a more collaborative way early on. Because one psychological insight is that people change their behavior by acting differently, not by thinking differently. If I want to start running, I don't just wake up in the morning and think, all right, I'm now a super healthy, fit person, I will go running. I start to go for a walk. I start to leave my trainers out the night before, and then I start to take on those behaviors. I start to internalize that identity as well. So your aim should be, how can you help salespeople change their identity from someone who's adversarial with procurement to someone who actually picks up the phone to procurement to get your help. That's ways in which strategies you could think about do that.
No, that's fascinating, because we do a lot of, and if you kind of listen to some previous episodes, I'll plug them in the description.
No, you told me not to for the quick fire round. So.
No, I did.
I acted on what you said. There you go.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. We actually do a lot of stakeholder management, right? So in the SIPS chartership, the standards you were talking about earlier, that really does set the kind of bar on stakeholder management. It's crucial to our role, dealing with a lot of people, a lot of different perspectives. No two people are the same, which is makes it tough, but makes it interesting. And I think that's what I certainly love about the job a lot more than other roles I've had previously, because no day is the same. You get to know a lot of people very, very well, but that doesn't always translate into action, certainly from my experience. So I could tell you that they've got 3 cats and their auntie lives in Canada or whatever, but that doesn't necessarily translate to them engaging in procurement earlier.
No.
We'll have a great conversation and we might go for a pint and it'll be great, but I'm missing something, and I don't know if at an individual level, that's something that would kind of inspire them to take that little bit earlier action, or that little bit more proactive action.
Immediately I started thinking about just the fact that people, I know the Global Standard everywhere else talks about stakeholder management being important, but to me even the title it is given is unhelpful, because we all love being pigeonholed as a stakeholder, and we all love being managed in different ways. So how can we sort of practical things, how do we break even that even that dynamic?
The sort of like engagement rather than management, a better term.
Yeah, people, it's a truism, but what's in it for them? At the moment, maybe what's in it for them is they talk about their three cats, and that in itself is on some level meeting needs. It's a value exchange, but they could probably get that from somewhere else. Maybe not. But in terms of actually collaborating, so what are their objectives? What's their role in the organization? This is the whole sort of, I suppose, strategic partner function, rather than just being a business unit or a cost function in an organization. What is their strategy? What are their objectives? Have they how well developed is that strategic thinking? Because there may well be things that procurement sort of know what's coming, which is super useful. What was super useful for them to know in advance. Maybe their thinking is underdeveloped. Maybe it's not as holistic as it ought to be. And so adding to their thinking, I think will position you better for future conversations, so they know to come to you as a source of knowledge and insights and wisdom in the future.
Sorry, go on, Luke.
I was thinking just off the back of that. So if we kind of said, instead of just going, "Oh, you need to engage us earlier," and just sort of repeating that same line, if we said, "Do you know what? If next time you engage us earlier, we could, provide you with a supply that would give a price 20% cheaper, and their delivery times would be a few less days. These are the benefits that we can get for you," then that would cause them to act differently.
Yeah, and potentially there's a good book by a social psychologist called "No One Understands You and What to Do About It." And in there, Heidi Grant Halverson talks about the three lenses that we perceive other people through. And I think she says there's a trust, a power, and an ego lens. So trust, obviously, like do I trust this person? Will this person deliver? Ego, does this person make me feel good about myself? And then the power lens is, can they do things? Can they do things for me? Or conversely, will they make me do things as well? But more elemental than that is that we're perceiving, she says we're cognitive misers. So we're forming quick impressions very, 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 very fast. There's different stages of perceiving. So first impressions really, really matter, and things like the halo effect really matter. Luke was great on this project, he'll be good on that project. Even if the other project is completely different, if you've done well one way, people assume it will transfer. Maybe completely wrong to assume that, but that's the halo effect. So when people are perceiving you, they're looking at you through these different lenses. We're doing it all very fast and automatically, which is all the very unhelpful biases come into play as well. But when you're working with salespeople and engagement people, do they trust you? And trust comes down to, do you project warmth and competence? So never underestimate the value of being competent at what you do, because if people think you're useless, you're off to a bad start. But also warmth as well. Not for me to pass judgment on how good procurement folks are at projecting warmth at the moment, but the scientific evidence suggests that the more warm you come across, the more competent and trustworthy you are perceived, and therefore something to think about in an authentic way, of course. And then there's that ego, making people feel good about themselves. So making them feel good about their cats by having that chat may well be valuable on one level, but there'll be other ways in which you can make people feel good about themselves in your interactions, not least professionally, in terms of what you want to jointly accomplish together as well. And then there's that power part, which hypothesizing, no evidence for this, but is there any risk that in the past sometimes procurement people sort of play the power lens, the power card, in a negative way?
100%.
Ultimately, I control the purse strings, therefore you need to get on board with this. Whereas actually, the positive framing would be, yes, I am powerful and I have this role, but this is how I can help you to help us achieve things for our organisation. So, some things to think about.
I mean, you've blown my mind. I think what I didn't kind of factor in before we started the podcast was that every time I ask you a question, another 50 develop when I hear your answers. I feel like we could talk all day. I know, sort of time-wise, we're probably calling it there. And I think if you've got another bit of spare time at some point, we could potentially poach you for a part 2, because I think there's a lot more to be said on it. If you could summarize, or I guess provide one bit of advice to someone who's just starting their career in procurement, about maybe how they could take a behavioural scientific approach to their work, or something that would potentially benefit them in their journey, is there anything you can think of, or maybe any books you could recommend? I know you've just recommended one, but kind of leave that open to you.
So one of the key foundational insight of behavioural science is that we often have these really unhelpful expectations or assumptions about other people, types of their behaviour, why they behave in the way in which they do. So people are familiar with this idea. Oh, everyone else, we're this old economic idea that people are, they're rational and they're self-interested and the like. And behavioural economics, part of behavioural science, is well, actually, it's a lot more complicated and messy than that. People behave in different ways. It's not that they're irrational necessarily, although there are books called things like predictably irrational. These terms are quite loaded and sometimes unhelpful. But the point is that we have these unhelpful assumptions about why people are behaving. And if you don't talk to people, you don't really observe them, and you don't know a little bit of psychology about how the mind works, it's very easy to fall into these traps. So reading a little bit about those foundational insights of behavioural science, about how, not how the brain works per se, but how the brain influences behaviour, how people are processing information and the like. That chat we just had about why, that great title of the book, No One Understands You, and what to do. Why are people not understanding you? Approach it with curiosity and humility. A big part of behavioural science really needs to be humility. You can't just take a nudge off the shelf and apply it as a silver bullet to solve all these problems. But be curious about people's behaviour. And that will sort of help to understand and overcome those unhelpful expectations about other people that you may have. But it's really hard because people, we work in fast-paced environments. Things are really tough. People are expecting quick rate of return and return on investment. All of this very, 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 very quickly. But ultimately, there is a competitive advantage, I think, to having a more rounded, holistic understanding of how people behave.
No, absolutely. I think so. One of the things you said at the very, very start was that I think part of your role is to help people think. So we're probably on episode, I don't know, mid to late 20s now, and I haven't got Luke 10 to think about anything productive yet. So I'm hoping
tumbleweed up here.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that he's learned something today, and we can take that away. But I really want to read that book, No One Understands You. And maybe I'll bring that back to a part 2 if that's okay, Jonti. But thank you so much. Honestly, it's been very, very helpful so far for both of us, and I'm sure it will be for our listeners as well. I did
want to finish off with one psychology joke. Luke 1 knows what's coming. So I want. Does this joke make sense to you? Because I find it quite funny, but let's see how it goes. How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? Just one, but the light bulb has to want to change.
Very good.
Do you hate that a lot?
No, it's a great joke. I mean, it's good.
It's better than the normal rubbish he spouts.
Yeah.
I mean, the jokes. Our kids are very into jokes, but they think that knock jokes should have a right answer, which is quite a funny dynamic.
Brilliant. Wow. And all right, cool. We'll see you on the next one.
Brain's a bit fried, but I thought that was really good.
Your brain's a bit fried.
Honestly, I don't know what was happening outside my house. I saw like 2 fire engines and like 3 ambulances go past. I have to keep going on mute. So
I called him up and I said, Luke 10's thinking. Like, fuck, we'll send out the police. Wait, I didn't even realise. You did press record, right?
Yeah, I did. Well, I hope so. Yeah. So, I mean, thanks for everyone for listening. We are into series 2 now by just a few episodes, I think. We're recording this and we currently haven't finished season 1 yet in the live episodes, but we did make it back for a season 2.
That's how we roll.
If you want to get in touch, our email is 2lukes1sip@gmail.com. So number 2, Luke's plural, 1 CIP@gmail.com.
Or you'll find it in the description of the episode, because you might not be able to jot that down while he's reading it. What about our socials? Have we got any socials?
We do have Instagram. I think that's like Let's Talk Procurement _. So slide into our DMs on that one. The Twitter is 2lukes1sip, but again, we don't actually post anything on there. So
and is that 2 the number, Luke's plural?
one
the
CIP.
number. Yeah, one CIP. Brilliant.
Yeah, we've currently got 3 followers on it. And the last time I posted on it was 26th of March. So that was
26th of
Spanish and
March.
French trains.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, follow that. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and hopefully we'll get Jonti back for a second one.
Yeah, let us know if you do want a Jonti part 2, and if you've got any questions for him. Drop us a text message using the text message feature, or slide into one of our DMs. And
I do have more psychology jokes prepared.
Oh,
so
God.
if we do a part 2, then those will be coming out.
Brilliant.
Anyway.
Well, that's the ending. Should we do the intro?
Yeah. See you later, but then see you in a bit.
See you later.